Hey, what's up guys? It's your boy Long Nipples, back with another Dark Souls 3 video, and today we're going to see if we can beat Dark Souls 3 only using consumables. In the last video, I asked you guys to tell me what your favorite pasta shape was, and I'm not really sure why I did that, but this time I figured I should ask an important question, so I really do need to know which one of your bones is your favorite, and why. This is very important. To start the run, there's not really much we need to do except start the game by choosing the black firebombs as your gift and then snatch these firebombs down here from this group of hoodlums. In order for us to actually be able to do enough damage to kill the boss, in the first phase you pretty much have to parry every single one of his attacks and then do an attack because he takes more damage when he's stunned from a parry, so it's a good thing I've literally never missed one in my life because this man hits harder than my dad, so if you miss your parry, you're gonna be in trouble. Once I get into the second phase, I start aiming for his big old tumor, and I honestly had to do this part like 5 times because I kept forgetting to say Kobe before throwing my bomb, so a lot of my shots were missing and I had to keep making a character again over and over. Now we can head on over to Firelink, get the tree jump on our very first try, get the serpent ring which gives us more souls per enemy, which is very important in this kind of run, bust it down sexual style next to the Firekeeper, and head to the High Wall of Lothric. There's really not a whole lot we need to do here. I just run around grabbing some items so I can sell them for later, avoid enemies like they had cooties, grab the key, save Grey Rat so I can buy some firebombs and some throwing knives for the next boss. So we head on over to the next boss, and at the beginning of the fight I was just using my throwing knives, and this man has clearly lost some, if not all of his marbles, because he was just walking towards me very slowly, taking it like an absolute champ with no care in the world. Once the knives in his face do start to bother him a bit, it's really easy just to hide under that dumpy he's packing and just keep throwing firebombs at his little old belly. Once I get into the second phase, he always starts it with a 3 charge attack and then follows up with a very long drawn out ice breath attack, and that's when we can bust out the rope firebombs and just start shitting them out on him. I was actually kind of surprised with how good the rope firebombs were because they do just as much damage as a regular firebomb, but they come out a lot faster, but it does take an extra couple brain cells firing off to be able to use them correctly. Then I would just keep waiting for him to do that over and over again because it was basically the only attack that I could get a lot of damage in without any risk basically. Now we could head back to Firelink to level up and bust it down freaky style in front of Andre and head on over to the Undead Settlement. First thing I need to do here is grab the Fire Clutch ring to boost the damage of my firebombs, and then I grab Grey Rat's wife's bone just because I'm a real sicko, or a real sick guy. With those in hand, we can head to the Road of Sacrifice, grab the drippiest outfit in the game, and, you weren't supposed to see that. I meant to delete that, I swear. And if you're wondering how I'm gonna get more souls after I sell everything, at least for now, I'm gonna use the giant down here who kills all these enemies for free, and it's not very efficient, but it is what it is. Now I need to go on another rescue mission for an NPC, and I know I'm down bad because this man's face hole is about to make me act up. I needed this guy because 1, he gives you 5 free levels and all you have to do is unalive yourself a handful of times, and 2, once you do unalive yourself 5 times, a new NPC will spawn that will sell you infinite poison throwing knives. Now we could head to the Crystal Sage, and the first thing I do is just run up on him and start dropping jars of Gamer Girl farts on him, and as long as you get close enough to him every time he teleports away, usually you can just stun lock him before he does any damage to you. Once those run out, I switch to my regular throwing knives, but only for a little bit because before the halfway mark you want to switch to your poison throwing knife, so he'll be poisoned for the second phase. The second phase is pretty rough though, but as long as you run up to the right one and start doing damage immediately, it's great, but my low IQ having ass usually got the wrong one and would have to hide behind a pillar.
Uh-oh. Stinky.
Once I was behind a pillar though, I'm suddenly playing Gears of War because I have to keep peeking around the corner trying to get a shot off and then hide behind cover before somebody shoots me. Luckily, each of the clones only take 1 knife to kill, and then you can just run up to the boss and start doing some damage. Near the end of the fight, I actually ran out of Estus flasks, so I ran up this hill, and out of desperation I threw 1 last firebomb when I really shouldn't have, and it actually ended up being a double homicide, but it still counts in my favor. Before the Crystal Sage, I sent Grey Rat out on the town to find me some loot, and once you defeat him, he comes back, and now he sells 6 lightning urns, which will be useful for later in the game. I also decided to head back to Undead Asylum so I can get the Chloroform ring and Flynn's ring, but before that, just because I'm a complete sicko, an absolute mad lad, a real crazy guy, I decided to fight the mini-boss with Sequard. It was actually a lot easier than I thought, probably just a waste of throwing knives, but we had a lot of laughs, a lot of good times, and just look at the little guy, he's all tuckered out now, so cute. I did go ahead and grab Flynn's ring after this, and it would probably be a lot more useful if I decided to wear lighter armor or just take it off, but it's just too drippy. Come on guys, you know I'm not taking it off. Now I could head on over to the cathedral, and then I face myself in one of the sexiest Dark Souls 3 battles of all time until we make it to the next bonfire. Now we can just run through, stepping on all kinds of buttons, opening all kinds of doors, until we find this bald beautiful man who generously tells me about some treasure right across this bridge. After I was betrayed, we do a little hop skip down here to find the bastard himself, and unfortunately I have to forgive him because he sells infinite black bombs and alluring skulls, which I'm gonna need for the next boss, which we're gonna take on right now. Before I started, just in case, I left myself some extra firebombs and some alluring skulls right outside the fog wall, which you can do by just leaving whatever you need and then running back to the bonfire and sitting down, which will refill your stock if you have any extra. That way, in the middle of the fight, if I need to refill, you can just run over to the fog wall and grab whatever you need. The Deacons fight was actually pretty tricky-dicky because we actually have to do a handful of steps to be able to pull it off, otherwise it's going to be extremely difficult. The first thing we have to do is kill the first 4 glowing Deacons, and to do that I mainly stuck with the firebombs at first because there's so many enemies that it's almost impossible to hit the right one with your throwing knives. Plus, the firebomb will most likely damage a bunch of the other Deacons around you, and if you get lucky, the next one you need to kill might be one of the ones you already hurt a bunch to save you some time and some consumables. Once you kill the first 4 Deacons, you need to herd the rest of the group like a bunch of sheep to the very back of the room, kill the 5th one, throw a skull, and then Usain Bolt back to the front of the room. For that last one, I specifically like to use throwing knives instead of the bomb because if you accidentally kill a handful of the Deacons along with the 5th one, it's going to make a bunch of other ones spawn in the front of the room. Once you make it back to the front, throw another skull to distract the main boss's bodyguards and then just start going ham on him. I had no real strategy, I was just kind of throwing everything I had. In the middle of a couple of attacks, throw another skull and just rinse and repeat that. Near the end of the fight, my curse meter started filling rapidly, and if it fills, it's an instant death, so I just said fuck it, we ball, and just started chucking everything I had at him without throwing any more skulls. Luckily, his bodyguards didn't get close enough to him at the end of the fight to be able to heal him, because if they did, that probably would have been my 13th reason, but I was able to finish off the boss with about a width of a ball hair left on my curse meter. Now we could head back to Firelink and actually level up a handful of times, start making our way towards the Abyss Watchers, trick these 2 goofy goobers into falling to their death and Fortnite dance on their grave all spunky style, and then head into the swamp. Now I just gotta run around here for a while, hitting X on the things to open the thing, and once again, just because I am an absolute sicko, a real crazy guy, locked me up in a psych ward, I decided to take on the Stray Demon just for the thrill of it. It was actually really boring and took a really long time. It was just me running back and forth on the bridge, throwing a bomb after every one of his attacks, and then I ended up having to switch to my throwing knives at the end of the fight. It was worth it though because I used his soul and the Crystal Sage soul so I can level up a bunch of times and go take on the Abyss Watchers. For the first phase, I could just let the Red Eye Abyss Watcher do most of the work and save my consumables, but I like to risk it for the biscuit, and that baby is looking fresh out of the oven, covered in Smucker's jelly, and besides, your firebombs actually do a pretty good amount of damage, so it really wouldn't make sense not to. I pretty much just spent the entire time running around like crazy, tossing a bomb at him every once in a while, and the Red Eye Abyss Watcher was actually about as useful as a wet napkin, so I'm glad I decided to fight him myself. Once he decides to go sicko mode, I spent a very long time just running circles around the arena, waiting for him to do one of his really long combos, and then roll into him and throw a firebomb and run away. And you have to roll into him and not away from him, because if you're too far away, he's most likely going to dodge your firebomb. Now we could hustle our way through the catacombs, doing literally nothing except opening the shortcut just in case until we make it to Wolnir. He was definitely the easiest boss so far. I was actually kind of worried at first because this is probably the only boss you can't put something outside of the fog wall, so I was really scared I wasn't going to have enough stuff, but it was really easy. You just run up, hit his bracelets with a few firebombs, hit the other one with a few firebombs, switch to the black firebombs for the last one, and it was easy peasy. My parents didn't want me squeezy. It was probably the easiest 24,000 souls I've made, but sadly I had to spend my bands on Sigurd's armor so I could rescue him, so he could rescue Grey Rat later, and I know I could have gotten patches to do it, but I still would have had to spend 20,000 souls, and I hate bald people, so there it is. Also, I remembered to grab these ashes so I can give them to the merchant, so she'll start selling me these bigger knives that can cause some of the bosses to take bleed damage. Now I could head to the valley, kill this dog thing, and then I remembered the old Demon King boss is a thing, so I backtracked and headed down there instead, but not before I told Grey Rat to head to the valley so he can come back with better loot after I take out the old Demon King. And if you're wondering, yes, a consumable can break this bridge. And if you weren't wondering, fuck you. As you can probably guess, the old Demon King is very resistant to fire, so our firebombs don't do much, but our throwing knives are still effective, so we leave an absolute metric buttload of them outside of the fog wall, which is very convenient since the bonfire is like 5 feet away. For the first phase, I would just get really far away and just keep throwing knives at him because he has a flame breath attack that goes ridiculously far, but I would just keep my distance, throw knives, wait till he gets close, and just run away and just keep doing that until the second phase. Surprisingly, the second phase is a bit easier because he doesn't do the flame breath quite as often, and he has a move where he starts doing the YMCA but stops at the Y and just kind of stands there for a while, letting you get a lot of damage in. It's also really easy to avoid that attack by just running away and hiding behind one of the Mountains of Asylum demons, but it did make for the longest boss fight so far. It wasn't even that hard, just really long, which would make for the weirdest penis ever, but once we did finally beat him, we got a nice chunk of change out of it. Grey Rat did return safely from his journey, but sadly he didn't have any more consumables for me to buy, but I did buy the Buckler Shield from him before heading to Pontiff for its supreme ability to parry. Now we can just sprint through the level until we find our old pal and have a nice drink with him and hustle on over to Pontiff. Pontiff is actually one of the few bosses you can poison, so I start off the fight using my poison knives. It doesn't do a massive amount of damage, but there's really no reason not to. For the first half of the fight, I would just keep my distance and bait him into doing his leaping attack so I could parry it and get a few shots off. Once I did that, I need to roll into him instead of immediately trying to run away because they perfectly designed him to punish spam rollers, so you do need to dodge a couple of attacks and then skedaddle on out of there. Also, the footage I'm using for the first half of this fight is actually from a failed attempt, but it was way cleaner than the time I actually won, so I wanted to use this to make it seem like I was actually good at the game or something. So I just keep doing that until we get to the second phase, and that's when I immediately switch to my black firebomb, so as soon as Pontiff starts to summon his clone, you can start throwing him at him and hopefully kill his clone, so he has to stop to re-summon him again, and you can just keep doing that over and over. At least that's what would have happened if I didn't have brain damage, but I messed up after the second or third attempt and had to fight him for real. Not only is this part a lot more annoying because there's literally two of him now, but also he loves to dodge your attacks a lot more often in this phase, so that was pretty not cash money of him. After running back and forth for a very long time, getting in little bits of damage whenever I could, I finally ended up giving him that 2-piece with a soda and an adult Happy Meal toy and finished him off. Once that's taken care of, we quickly run through the next area, not doing a damn thing, running past some enemies, contemplating who won that Sweet Life of Zack and Cody Danimal sweepstakes until we make it to the next boss. I wasn't sure how this was going to go, but it turns out that this femboy is weak to fire, just like femboys in real life and everyone else, so that's pretty convenient, but in the first phase I decided to just stick with my knives so I can save my firebombs and stuff for the second phase. I would pretty much just wait for him to teleport, immediately run up on him, dodge his attack, throw a knife or two, and I probably should have been using my regular throwing knives because the animation for these ones are really slow and you can't roll really quickly right after throwing it like you can with the regular throwing knives. Eventually we make it to the second phase, and if you've been on this channel for a while and have seen any of my other Dark Souls 3 videos, you'll be glad to know that I am still complete dog shit at dodging that arrow attack. But as long as you stand in the middle of the arena, it's not too bad because usually you can predict where he's going to spawn because it's always the farthest corner from you, and as long as you get close enough to him, he usually will not do the arrow attack. Once I get close enough to him, I turn around and just start dropping some dookies on him because, like I said before, the rope firebombs drop a lot faster than you can throw them, so you can get a lot of damage in pretty quick on him. Most of his attacks are usually pretty slow and easy to dodge. My only issue was just standing in the fire, and you also really want to avoid him doing the attack that steals your health because that's just going to make it take way longer. Now we need to backtrack a little bit so we can head through the dungeon to get to Yorm, but the first thing we need to do is get the Hawk Ring, which reduces the drop-off damage from your throwing knives and makes you throw your firebombs a little bit farther, but sadly we have to kill the giant that was helping us farm souls earlier in the game, which is the reason I didn't get it earlier. With that in hand, we can sprint through the dungeon, doing absolutely nothing, killing absolutely nobody until we get to the Yorm fight. This fight almost took a half hour to complete, 28 minutes to be exact, so I'm going to play this footage extremely fast, probably too fast for the human eye to comprehend because I want you to see that I really did it all, and it really took that long. Now, I probably could have done it a bit faster, but I was playing it very cautious, especially in the last 10 minutes of the fight where I had 0 flasks left and half a health bar, so his voluptuous feet could have stomped me at any point and one-shotted me. Despite the fact that you could actually aim at his head, it was really hard to hit him there sometimes unless it was between one of his moves and he was standing still, but when you did, it was great because it only took a few knives to stagger him, and then you can just empty a bunch of knives into his skull. Once I made it to the second phase, it gets even harder because he adds a bunch of moves, and it seems like he does a bunch of more damage now, and he's just a lot more aggressive in general. The only reason I was even able to survive and get past the second phase is because eventually I realized that whenever he does his overhead slam attack, he'll usually follow that up with a jump, and then I can roll into him, and while he's on the ground, I can hit him in the head with a knife and run away. But I do need to be really careful because if he does happen to land that jumping attack, it puts me closer to death than Betty White. She's already dead. What? The Queen of England. Her too. Prince Philip. R.I.P. What the fuck's going on? After 28 excruciating minutes, I was finally able to send him to the Shadow Realm, took a quick feet pick as a reward, and immediately get teleported to the Dancer fight. It was going to go or what I needed to bring, so I just kind of brought a little bit of everything, and this was my first attempt, so it does look pretty bad. Despite me getting my cheeks clapped for a while, this fight was actually pretty easy. The dancer is usually only dangerous when you're really close up, so as long as you keep your distance and just keep chucking knives at his head, it shouldn't be too bad. She does have a couple moves where she can close the distance on you pretty quick, but other than that, as long as you stay far away, it's probably one of the easiest fights in the run so far. Now we can start heading towards the Dragon Slayer armor, and I don't know why I never did this, but at the Dragon Bridge, instead of running all the way around and killing the little sack thing you're supposed to kill, I just straight up ran across the bridge, just taking the fire like a champ, and somehow made it through. This was another boss fight that took a really long time, and I had to set out a bunch of black firebombs outside of the arena because I'm gonna need a lot of them. Most of the time, I had to try to hit him in between or after one of his attacks. Since my throwing animation is so slow, I had to play a very butt-clenching game where I had to be close enough to hit him, but far enough away that his follow-up attack wouldn't reach me. The second phase is mostly the same, except now he does have a couple of new openings, but I also have to worry about getting shot off screen by a giant laser or hit by one of these red flying thingamajigs. Surprisingly, I was able to avoid like 99% of the projectiles, except for this one laser near the very end that I just happily and willingly waltzed into like it was a room full of big titty goth girls. Oh, and also, after a solid 10-minute fight, at the very end, I legitimately died with one hit left, and I got mad, went and took a shit, and came back and forgot to start my recording back up and kicked his ass, but this is close enough, right? It still counts, right? You believe me. Nope, doesn't count. You're gay. Now we can head towards the Twin Princes, but first we need to take a bath in the cum zone, and that's it. That's all we gotta do. Now we're ready to fight him. Now this was easily the hardest fight in the run, so I decided to take my armor off for this one so I can get a little bit of a damage boost from Flynn's ring, and I also got the Karthus Blood Ring to give me a few more iframes when I'm rolling, because we are going to be doing a lot of rolling in this fight, especially in the second phase. Sadly, wearing that ring also means I'm going to be taking an extra 30% damage, so some of his attacks can almost one-shot me, but it's still worth it for me. The first phase wasn't too difficult. I just kept my distance and just kept chucking the big knives at him, and this is probably the first time I've seen a boss actually take bleed damage in this run, and honestly it wasn't even that much, and it literally took almost 30 knives. There's not too much to worry about in this phase. He's pretty passive when you're at a distance, but he can just bust out a quick teleport at any time, so you do need to be ready for that. The second phase is way harder though. This is where I had to bust out my fast throwing knives because nothing else I have is nearly fast enough to be able to hit him and not take any damage. Most of the time, I just tried to stay really close to him so he wouldn't do too many magic attacks, and then after every swing, I would try to roll to his back and get a knife throw in or two. Doing this can be pretty frustrating because a lot of the times I didn't get back far enough and I accidentally hit the wrong brother, so it's just a lot of wasted knives and making me take more risks having to run back to the fog wall to grab more. Every once in a while, he will teleport away and do his giant beam attack, but it takes him a second to charge it up, so you can get to the perfect position to try to roll behind him, but not too close where he's going to swing his sword, because you want his brother to shoot some magic at you so you can roll behind him and get a couple throws in. This was another extremely long boss fight, especially the second phase, which was like 90% of it, which probably would have been a lot faster if I didn't suck and keep hitting the wrong one, but it is what it is. Alright boys, last boss time, Soul of Cinder. For him, I just stuck with the throwing knives because he's very fire resistant and I can throw these a lot farther. I also brought some Undead Hunter Charms with me to stop him from healing in his spear phase because that did happen to me in a couple of my attempts and about made me throw a bitch fit or two. For his sword phase, I would just keep running away the entire time, stopping to throw a knife every once in a while he chases me, and also every time after an attack I can get a couple knife throws in and then just keep running away. In his mage phase, I would keep somewhat of a distance from him so he'll use his long range spell, because if you're too close, he'll use this shotgun spell, which is a lot harder to dodge. I would also only make sure to use the fast throwing knives in this phase because I can hit him a couple times between his spells whenever he shoots them at me. Whenever he uses that giant Kamehameha attack, if you're close enough you can just get behind him and do a ton of damage, but usually I wasn't, so I would just try to run away and avoid it. Spear phase is probably one of the harder ones to deal with. I would try to stay close and always dodge to the right, because if you try to dodge backwards you're going to get poked nice and hard. But you can't stay too close because if you do, he really likes to just randomly explode every once in a while, so you always need to be ready to dodge that. And like I said before, every time he goes into this phase, I always hit him with the Hunter Charm to make sure he can't heal. For the Pyromancer phase, well, we don't mess with the Pyromancer phase around here. The only time I would even attempt to hit him is if he was using the Power Within spell or if he was doing the Poison Breath, but other than that, I would usually use this time to refill my knives. Speaking of which, I severely underestimated how many throwing knives I would need for this because I ran out right before the second phase, but luckily I still had a bunch of the big ones left. The second phase is actually a bit easier than the first because he has a lot less moves in this one, and a lot of them just leave him open, like his super ultra mega combustor attack where he just kind of stands there for a while just letting you throw knives at him. Weirdly though, most of the time they would always miss except for the very end, so usually I just started waiting to the end of his attack and then I would get a couple hits in. Also, whenever he throws lightning, you can just dodge and then throw a knife. Sometimes he follows it up with a second one, but you have just enough time to dodge that one as well. And sometimes he'll also throw lightning in the sky, and that's probably your best opportunity because sometimes you can get like 3 or 4 hits in. So yeah, that's basically it. The entire fight I was just running away, just waiting for one of those 3 moves to take advantage of, and the entire fight took about 16 minutes, so it was the second longest fight in this run, but still a bit easier than the twins. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. I have about 3 videos I'm working on right now. I want to do Demon Souls and Dark Souls 2 Pyromancy only, and I want to do Dark Souls 3 only using the dragon form. So if any of that interests you and you're not already subscribed, maybe subscribe if you think I deserve it, and shout out to all my channel members who you see on screen right now, and special shout out to these members: Buck, Mr. Swigadoo, Juno, Chris Sura, and Pixel Bagel. If you happen to be interested in supporting the channel, you can join for the price of 1 Arizona iced tea a month, get your name at the end of the video like these guys, get early access to videos, exclusive videos, a Chad badge, and some Charlie emojis. So if any of that tickles your fancy, you could hit the join button on screen. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day. Peace.